Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you love captivating stories about men transforming into women in unique and fascinating ways, then be sure to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Now, let's jump right into today's tale.
Chapter 7: Stolen Steps. Saruto stood in front of Sakura's full-length mirror, trying not to hyperventilate. He was wearing a dress. Not just any dress, but a shimmering midnight blue number that hugged every new curve like a secret whispered against bare skin. The fabric was soft and clingy, some silky material that caught the light with every nervous breath, transforming from navy to cobalt depending on how she moved. The neckline dipped in a sweetheart curve, low enough to tease but not scandalize, revealing collarbones that seemed impossibly delicate compared to Naruto's usual sturdy frame. The bodice cinched at a waist that still felt alien, narrower than he was used to, creating an hourglass silhouette that made him do a double take every time he caught his reflection. The hem ended just above the knees, showing off toned, unfamiliar legs that were smoother than anything Naruto had ever possessed. "This cannot be happening," Naruto muttered, running his hands down the silky material, feeling the unfamiliar contours beneath. The sensation of fabric sliding against bare skin sent shivers across nerve endings that seemed wired differently than in his original body, more sensitive, more responsive to even the lightest touch. A pair of delicate silver earrings dangled from her newly pierced lobes, courtesy of Ino's insistence, and a very sharp needle, catching the light with every nervous twitch and head turn. They brushed against the sides of his neck with feather-light touches, a constant reminder of this new feminine reality. Matching silver heels, higher than anything Naruto had ever worn, even in his most elaborate sexy jutsu transformations, added 3 precarious inches to his height and a subtle sway to his walk that he was still struggling to master. Each step required concentration, a complete recalibration of balance and weight distribution that left him feeling like a genin attempting an S-rank jutsu. Ino had insisted on doing Saruto's makeup, spending nearly an hour transforming Sakura's already pretty features into something more dramatic. She'd painted her lips a glossy pink that made them look fuller, more pouty, and dusted her cheeks with just enough blush to make her look like she was perpetually up to something, or had just been thoroughly kissed. Dark mascara made her lashes seem impossibly long, framing blue eyes that looked larger, more luminous against the subtle shimmer of eyeshadow. "I look like a completely different person," Saruto whispered, tilting her head to examine her reflection from different angles. The woman in the mirror was undeniably beautiful, with Sakura's delicate bone structure enhanced by careful makeup and Naruto's bright blue eyes adding an exotic touch. But beneath the surface glamour lurked something uniquely neither and both, Naruto's expressions animating Sakura's features, creating something entirely new. Sakura grinned from the doorway, arms folded across her chest as she leaned against the frame. She'd opted for a simpler look, a forest green dress that complemented her eyes, with minimal makeup and her pink hair styled in loose waves. "Damn, Saruto, you clean up nice." Ino outdid herself. Her eyes sparkled with mischief as she looked her body's doppelganger up and down. "Try not to trip in those heels or Ino will never let you live it down, and neither will I." Saruto glared, wobbling slightly as she turned to face Sakura. One hand reached out to steady herself against the dresser, fingers gripping the wood with white-knuckle intensity. "I feel like a kunai in a chopstick holder. Everything's too tall, too tight, and way too bouncy." She gestured vaguely at her chest, where the dress's supportive structure created cleavage that Naruto found simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. Do people really wear this stuff for fun? Or is it some kind of elaborate torture training? "Both," Sakura replied with a wicked grin. "The suffering is part of the experience. Beauty requires sacrifice, or so my mother always says." She pushed off from the doorframe and crossed to the dresser, selecting a delicate silver necklace that matched the earrings. "Turn around, let me put this on you." Saruto obeyed, lifting her pink hair out of the way. The sensation of cool metal against her collarbone, followed by Sakura's fingers brushing against the nape of her neck, sent another unfamiliar shiver down her spine. Everything felt amplified in this body, touches more electric, sensations more intense. "There," Sakura said, stepping back to admire the effect. "Now you're perfect. Just remember everything we practiced, Small steps in the heels, no scratching, no manspreading when you sit, and please, for the love of all things holy, don't try to adjust yourself in public. That was one time, Saruto muttered, cheeks heating at the memory of an unfortunate incident in the hospital cafeteria. How was I supposed to know bras could ride up like that? Sakura winked, checking her own appearance one last time. You'll get used to it. Just don't let Ino talk you into the red dress unless you want to start a riot. That thing is practically a declaration of war. She picked up a small clutch purse that matched her dress. Ready to face the music? Literally. Saruto took a deep breath, shoulders straightening with determination that looked oddly dignified on Sakura's more petite frame. As ready as I'll ever be. If anyone asks me to demonstrate a sand jutsu, I'm blaming you. The night air was thick with music and laughter when they arrived at the Lantern Club, one of Konoha's favorite haunts for shinobi looking to blow off steam after missions. Paper lanterns of every color hung from the ceiling and doorways, casting a warm, flattering glow over the crowd. The bass line of the music vibrated through the floorboards, a pulsing rhythm that Saruto could feel in her borrowed bones. Ino was already waiting inside, holding court at a small table near the dance floor. Her platinum blonde hair cascaded down her back in a sleek waterfall, and her purple dress seemed designed specifically to make heads turn, which they did, with almost audible neck cracks, as she spotted Saruto and Sakura and waved them over with enthusiastic gestures. Look at you, Ino squealed, abandoning her drink to grab Saruto by the wrists and spin her around in a circle that nearly sent her toppling. So, freaking, cute, the blue is perfect with your eyes, I told you it would work. She released Saruto only to step back and conduct a thorough visual inspection, nodding in approval. And those legs, if I had those, I'd never wear pants again. Never. I'd burn them all in a ceremonial bonfire and dance naked around the flames. Ino, Sakura hissed, glancing around at nearby tables where several shinobi were now looking their way with undisguised interest. Could you be any louder? There are still 3 people in Suna who didn't hear you. Saruto blushed, tugging at the hem of her dress, which seemed to have crept up during the enthusiastic spinning. The sensation of cool air against bare thighs was still novel, making her acutely aware of how exposed she felt compared to her usual practical attire. If I trip in these torture devices you call shoes, I'm blaming you. And Sakura. And possibly the architect who designed these unnecessarily slippery floors. Ino just laughed, tossing her hair in a practiced motion that sent several nearby chunin into a near-catatonic state. That's the spirit. Face death with sarcasm, very on brand for a Konoha kunoichi. She grabbed Saruto's hand, pulling her toward the crowded dance floor with inexorable force. Come on, time to dance. You can't wear a dress like that and hide in the corner all night. But I like corners, Saruto protested weakly, casting a desperate glance back at Sakura, who merely raised her drink in a mocking toast. They're structurally sound and don't require coordination. The dance floor was a whirl of color and sweat and thumping beats, bodies moving in varying degrees of rhythm and inhibition. The scent of perfume, cologne, and the distinctive undercurrent of chakra-infused adrenaline created an intoxicating atmosphere. Ino dragged Saruto into the center of it all, placing her hands on Saruto's hips and demonstrating the kind of swaying motion that apparently constituted dancing in this context. At first, Saruto was stiff, awkward, and painfully conscious of every bounce and jiggle that accompanied even the smallest movement. Her borrowed body seemed to have a mind of its own, curves responding to the bass in ways that made her want to cross her arms protectively over her chest. The heels complicated everything, requiring constant adjustment and rebalancing with each step. But Ino was relentless. She spun, she laughed, she teased, placing Saruto's hands on her own shoulders and guiding her through the motion. Loosen up, she shouted over the music. Pretend you're fighting but sexy, like your hips are throwing kanai. That makes no anatomical sense, Saruto yelled back, but found herself grinning despite the absurdity of the instruction. There was something infectious about Ino's confidence, about the carefree abandon with which she moved. Soon, Saruto couldn't help but let the music take over, her borrowed body finding a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. It was different from fighting, less about power and more about flow, less about dominating space and more about moving through it with grace. She spun, letting the dress flare around her thighs, and felt a surprising thrill at the sensation. The song changed to something with a faster beat, and Ino whooped in approval as Saruto found her groove, pink hair flying as she moved with growing confidence. Other dancers created a small space around them, a few whistles and appreciative glances making Saruto simultaneously self-conscious and boldly pleased. Ino leaned in during a brief lull, her breath warm against Saruto's ear, carrying the sweet scent of the fruity cocktail she'd been drinking. "You move pretty well for a newbie. Maybe I'll steal you from Sakura, make you my new dance partner." The suggestive tone in her voice was unmistakable, sending a flutter of something unfamiliar through Saruto's midsection. Saruto laughed, feeling a thrill that was equal parts Naruto's natural bravado and something new, a feminine confidence that came from knowing eyes were on her, appreciating what they saw. "Careful, I'm dangerous," she replied, surprising herself with the flirtatious lilt in her voice. "Might step on your toes, literally and figuratively." "Oh, I like dangerous," Ino purred, twirling Saruto around as the song shifted to something sultry and slow, the lights dimming in response. "Dangerous is my middle name. Well, actually it's Yamanaka, but that doesn't sound nearly as sexy when whispered in someone's ear." Their bodies pressed close in the slower rhythm, Ino's hands sliding down Saruto's back to rest just above the curve of her hips. For a dizzying moment, Saruto forgot everything except the pulse of the music and the electric thrill of being desired. It was nothing like the attention she received as Naruto. This was different, more focused, more intimate. Ino's lips brushed Saruto's cheek, her fingers tracing lazy circles along bare shoulders exposed by the dress's cut. "You smell amazing," Ino murmured, close enough that her lips nearly brushed Saruto's ear. "What is that, cherry blossom? Very on theme for a Haruno." "Oh, why yes," Saruto stammered, mind blanking on the name of the perfume Sakura had insisted she wear. "Cherry, something with hints of, flower, stuff." Ino laughed, the sound vibrating through both their bodies. "Eloquent as always, you really are." She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as she looked over Saruto's shoulder. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face, the expression of someone who just spotted the perfect opportunity for mischief. "Well, well, well, looks like our night just got a lot more interesting." Then the crowd parted like water before a shark, and everything changed. Sasuke, impossibly cool in a black dress shirt and tailored pants that looked custom-made for his lean frame, strode onto the dance floor. His usual battle-ready intensity had been channeled into something equally powerful, but more controlled, a smoldering presence that drew eyes from every corner of the club. He'd foregone his usual high collar, the open neck of his shirt revealing a tantalizing glimpse of collarbone and the defined muscles of his throat. His dark hair was artfully tousled, falling across one eye in a way that made half the room sigh audibly. His eyes locked on Saruto, dark and unreadable at first glance, but burning with something that made her breath catch. For a heartbeat, the noise of the club faded into silence, the music dimming to a distant throb beneath the sudden roaring in her ears. "Holy chakra infusion," Ino whispered, still close enough that only Saruto could hear. "He's actually dressed up. I don't think I've seen Sasuke in anything but combat gear or hospital gown since, ever." She squeezed Saruto's waist once, then stepped back with a theatrical sigh. "Duty calls, sweetheart. Can't stand in the way of destiny or whatever broody thing he'd say about this moment." Ino grinned, mischief dancing in her eyes as she raised her voice to be heard over the music. "Looks like you've attracted a fan, Saruto. Don't keep him waiting." She leaned in one last time, whispering, "And don't do anything I wouldn't do, which, admittedly, leaves your options wide open." Before Saruto could protest, Ino gently pushed her forward, the momentum carrying her a step closer to Sasuke. Her heels wobbled slightly on the polished floor, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she might faceplant right at his feet. What a perfect metaphor that would be. But Sasuke extended his hand with perfect timing, saving her from humiliation. His expression remained unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a gleam of amusement, perhaps, or something warmer, that made Saruto's heart skip. "Care to dance?" he asked, voice low and smooth, barely audible over the music yet somehow cutting through the noise with perfect clarity. Saruto hesitated, suddenly shy in a way Naruto had never been. This wasn't a sparring match or a mission. This was uncharted territory, a dance of a different kind. But the crowd was watching, whispers already spreading like wildfire, and Ino was waving encouragement from the sidelines where she'd joined a wide-eyed Sakura. She placed her hand in Sasuke's, heart pounding with such force she was certain he could feel her pulse through that simple point of contact. His fingers closed around hers, warm and surprisingly gentle for hands that had wielded so much destruction. Sasuke pulled her close with fluid grace, one hand settling at her waist, the other still holding her fingers lightly. The warmth of his palm through the thin fabric of her dress was distracting, anchoring her in a moment that otherwise felt surreal. He moved with a confidence that made Saruto's knees wobble, guiding her effortlessly through the slow, sinuous rhythm of the song. "I didn't know you danced," Saruto said, finding her voice after several breathless moments. A corner of Sasuke's mouth quirked up, not quite a smile, but close enough to be devastating. "There are many things you don't know about me," he replied, with just enough emphasis on you to make her wonder if he was speaking to Saruto or to someone else entirely. For the first time since this transformation began, Saruto let herself truly enjoy it. The way her dress shimmered with every turn, catching the colored lights in ripples of midnight blue. The heat of Sasuke's hand at her waist, firm but not possessive. The surprising grace with which her borrowed body responded to his lead, as if Sakura's muscle memory knew exactly how to move with him. Most disconcerting of all was the way his eyes never left hers, dark and intent as if memorizing every detail of her face. It was the same intensity he brought to battle, but channeled into something far more intimate. He leaned in, close enough that she could detect the faint scent of sandalwood and something distinctly Sasuke beneath it, his lips brushing dangerously close to her ear. "You're full of surprises, Saruto." The way he said the name, with that slight hesitation, that hint of a question, sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cool air of the club. She swallowed, caught between a laugh and a gasp. "I could say the same about you. Never pictured you as the dancing type." Sasuke's hand at her waist pulled her incrementally closer, their bodies now separated by mere inches. "A shinobi adapts to any situation," he murmured, executing a perfect turn that had her following as if they'd rehearsed it. "Besides, some battles are worth the effort." Was he calling this a battle? The thought was both alarming and thrilling. Saruto found herself rising to the challenge, her natural competitiveness surfacing despite, or perhaps because of the unfamiliar circumstances. "You move like you've been dancing all your life," Sasuke observed, guiding her through a more complex sequence of steps that she somehow managed to follow without tripping. His eyes narrowed slightly, analytical even in this setting. "For someone who claims to be from Suna, you follow Konoha rhythms very naturally." There it was, the subtle interrogation beneath the compliment. Sasuke was still probing, still suspicious of her identity, even here in this most unlikely of settings. The realization should have been terrifying, but instead, Saruto felt a surge of that familiar exhilaration that came from challenging Sasuke, from pushing him to acknowledge her skills. "Maybe I just have a good teacher," Saruto shot back, emboldened by the music and the way Sasuke's hand tightened fractionally at her waist in response to her quip. "Or maybe I'm just naturally gifted at—" She paused, allowing a hint of suggestion to color her tone, "physical activities." Something flashed in Sasuke's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or appreciation for the unexpected comeback. His lips curved in what was definitely a smile now, small but genuine. "That sounds like someone else I know," he said, voice dropping even lower. "Someone who never knows when to back down from a challenge." As the song slowed to its final notes, Sasuke executed one last move, spinning her out with their joined hands, then pulling her back in with controlled strength that brought her flush against his chest for a breathless moment. Their faces were inches apart, his breath warm against her lips, and the air between them shimmered with unspoken questions. For a suspended moment, Saruto wondered. If she leaned in, closing that final distance, would he kiss her? Would she want him too? And what would it mean if he did? Would he be kissing Saruto, or Sakura, or somehow knowing it was Naruto all along? The complexity of it made her dizzy, or perhaps that was just the effect of being held so close to someone she'd known for so long but never quite like this. The song ended, breaking the spell as applause broke out around them for the band. Sasuke released her, slowly, reluctantly, as if savoring the moment or perhaps reluctant to end whatever test this had been. His hands lingered at her waist for a heartbeat longer than necessary before he stepped back, restoring a proper distance between them. Before either could speak, Ino bounced over, practically vibrating with excitement, her eyes gleaming with the particular shine of someone who just witnessed prime gossip material. "You two were on fire. I swear half the room stopped dancing just to watch." She nudged Saruto with her elbow, none too gently. "Sakura's going to die when she hears about this." Oh wait, she already saw it and nearly choked on her drink. Saruto glanced over to where Sakura sat at their table, eyes wide, an expression of mingled shock and amusement frozen on her face. She raised her glass in a mock toast when she caught Saruto looking, mouthing something that looked suspiciously like, "What the hell was that?" Saruto flushed, breathless and exhilarated in a way that combat rarely left her. The heat in her cheeks, the tingling awareness of her skin, the fluttering sensation low in her abdomen, all of it was new, intense, and confusingly pleasant. Sasuke caught her gaze again, something like a challenge glinting in his dark eyes. "Save me another dance," he said quietly, the words carrying a weight beyond their simple meaning. Without waiting for a response, he turned and melted back into the crowd with the same effortless grace that characterized everything he did. Ino stared after him, then turned to Saruto with an expression of delighted disbelief. Did that just happen? Did Sasuke Uchiha, Ice Prince of Konoha, just ask you for another dance? In public? Voluntarily? She fanned herself dramatically. "I need a drink, or 5. This is historic." "It was just a dance," Saruto protested weakly, though she knew it had been anything but. The memory of his hand at her waist, his breath against her ear, still lingered like phantom touches. Ino nudged her, grinning from ear to ear. "You, my dear, are officially the most interesting girl in Konoha, and possibly the most envied. I counted at least 12 death glares aimed at your back during that little performance." Saruto could only laugh, cheeks burning as she realized, maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe it herself. This strange transformation, this borrowed body, this new perspective, perhaps there was more to it than she'd initially thought. Not just a prank gone wrong or a jutsu mishap, but an opportunity to see and be seen in entirely new ways. "Come on," Ino said, linking her arm through Saruto's and steering her toward the bar. "You need a drink, I need all the details, and Sakura looks like she's about to either laugh herself into a coma or murder us both. Possibly both." As they wove through the crowd, more than a few eyes followed Saruto's progress, the midnight blue dress catching the light with every step. For the first time since this adventure began, she didn't mind the attention. In fact, there was a part of her, growing larger by the minute, that rather enjoyed it.